Hello, and welcome to In the DeNovo, a series of video interviews with today's thought leaders on everything to do with treasury management, product management, and instant and faster payments, covering topics from payments to industry trends and other exciting subjects coming in the future. I'm Will Grace. I'm the host, founder, and managing director here at DeNovo Treasury. We're a consulting firm focused on helping financial institution leaders define strategy, transform client experience, and grow revenue in the treasury management space. Thanks for joining us and staying in the know with In the DeNovo. Hello, this is Will Grace, host of In the DeNovo and founder and managing director of DeNovo Treasury. I'm pleased to welcome to our program James Szuch, principal consultant, product strategy at Sparq. He is also a business coach and educator working with creative professionals and small businesses. James is a seasoned professional with a career-long record of technology product development and technology management experience. He is recognized for demonstrating a natural aptitude for administrating all aspects of the development and innovative digital and technology products in multiple industries, as well as for utilizing strategy and analytical insights to deliver results and for providing supervision and direction to all operations of cross-functional teams. His professional focal points include operations coordinations, relationships management, team leadership and collaboration, agile methodologies, Lean Six Sigma, business analysis, process improvement, portfolio management, vendor management, web development, software engineering, change management, consulting, program management, enterprise software, and product management. He is a passionate and innovative leader who can be relied on to build thriving businesses by building products that matter. James has one of the most fascinating backgrounds and career tracks that I know, and he'll elaborate on that shortly. He's not only a colleague, but someone that I was lucky to have worked with in the past and consider him a friend, and someone that we've partnered and developed something together actually early on in my career as a product manager. I learned a lot from him. Honored that he's agreed to join us today on In the DeNovo. Welcome, James.
Thank you, Will. It's really great to be here and talk to you. You alluded to the fact that we've worked together in the past, and those are some of my favorite product management experiences, both in terms of the process that we went through to get there, right? Because we kind of had fun, which if you're not having fun, why are you doing what you do? But we built some good products, and we solved some really interesting problems for treasury management customers, and I remember those well and speak of them often.
Yes, and we stole some business from a very large bank at the time, if you remember.
Yeah, I remember that.
And that was a lot of fun. So I alluded to you having a very fascinating career. I think it would be good for you to give a brief background of your journey and to our subscribers and listeners into where you've been and how you've gotten to where you are today, if you don't mind.
Sure. Thanks. Yeah, I kind of have what some authors who've books I've read on careers refer to as a squiggly career, right? It wasn't strictly linear. But yeah, so I started as a software developer, right? Right out of college, I was actually, it's funny today because right out of college, I was building expert systems. So we've kind of gone full circle with AI, but I started doing that and doing development. And it was fun. I loved it, right? I was solving complex problems in a lot of different industries, whether I was working for consulting firms or in industry or software. But I came to realize that writing code was just one piece of the puzzle, and there was more to it than that. So I went off to graduate school twice. So wrapped up with both a law degree and an MBA, and then went back into consulting. Working for major global professional services firms, working for some mid-tier firms, smaller boutique firms, particularly in the days of the early days of the internet, working through them with Fortune 100 companies to middle market businesses to small businesses and startups and nonprofits, looking at strategy, technology and strategy, operational issues, and really found that tackling business problems was what ignited my passion. As that happened, right, I got to do something that had been a lifelong dream of mine, which was to start teaching, right? So I was teaching at both the undergraduate and graduate levels, teaching technology to start, and then moving into teaching business and entrepreneurship, which was kind of my sweet spot, right? Teaching entrepreneurship capstone courses. And of course, that led to coaching, right? Working with people one-on-one. And when I moved to Nashville, which was about 9 years ago, through one of those sort of series of interesting coincidences, started working a lot with artists, artisans, fashion designers, creative professionals. And that's where I found this really interesting niche for myself as an educator and a coach. I'm a bit of an artist myself. I'm a serious amateur photographer. But what I realized was applying what I had learned through product development, product management, entrepreneurship, kind of in its modern, kind of tech form. There were a lot of tools and processes and skills and knowledge that I had that could help these businesses, as we mentioned, we started, right, build products that matter for people, and that's kind of where I moved there, and a little over a year ago joined Sparq, which is a digital and product engineering consultancy, as a principal product strategist. Right, so I'm back in that space of consulting with businesses in a variety of industries, including financial services, and of various sizes, to help them build better digital products and build those products better.
I think it's fascinating that you talk about artists and your background with product management and being able to apply that to something that I would have never thought would have that type of structure. Art seems something that's so freeform, and product management is so structured in what it's based on, right? And this methodology. I'm interested to hear, as we get into this discussion, how this all came together. And I don't want to get too far ahead.
Yep.
But this is going to be fascinating. So, and I don't, this is kind of the teaser, I guess, to how we're going to get there.
Tease away.
Yeah, no. So I guess we're going to talk some about jobs to be done, and we're going to talk about product management, and our listeners have had at this point a little bit of an education on jobs to be done. And I think that part of what you're going to be talking about in product is, how you brought jobs to be done into this process. And how long have you been a practitioner of jobs to be done?
That is one of those questions that I don't know that I can answer. I don't remember, right?
Yeah.
And maybe it's just I'm getting old, but
You and me both, brother.
I don't remember when it first crossed my path.
Okay.
It was one of those things where, and you'll remember some of the work that we did together, right? Because jobs to be done, it's an approach, a framework,
right,
a way of thinking about customer needs. And thinking about customer needs is part of business analysis, and part of product management, and always has been. So some of the things that we were doing, I don't think I was strictly doing jobs to be done when we were working together, but what we were doing was very much focusing on what are the jobs that our users are trying to do. What are the problems they're trying to solve? When I talk to people about this in classes, in particular, I'm going to throw out a lot of synonyms, right? Jobs is the same as needs, right? Jobs is the same as problems, right? Jobs is to some extent, at least the functional jobs, the same as use cases. So what I found interesting to me about it, as I was learning more about it, was applying that perspective to what was already going on in business analysis and product management, right? It's just a different way of thinking about it. And then the more I dug into some of the literature on it, right? So the stuff that Clayton Christensen had written, and he was sort of the person who brought this out to the world and said, hey, this is something that we ought to be thinking about. because it actually goes back, much further than that.
Sure.
But he was really the one that started to apply it. And then Alex Osterwalder is a name that some of your listeners might want to get to know. He has a company called Strategizer, and they've written a number of books on the application of jobs to be done, and they've taken a very process and quantitative approach to doing it. So when I actually practice jobs to be done, I'm kind of doing the stuff that comes out of their world. But I was really attracted to that quantifiable approach, that structured approach to looking at what the jobs are that customers are doing, and how do we evaluate the importance of those jobs, the value of those jobs, right? So that's a pricing conversation that we can have, right? And how do we evaluate how well we're performing? How well is my product doing at solving your problem and doing your job? And part of that sort of notion that comes from Clayton Christensen's work of hiring products to do jobs, right? And therefore firing products that aren't doing the job well, right? That thought process and that way of looking at the problem is, I found it to be particularly interesting. And then for me, and we talked a little bit about kind of the world of the artist, right? But the moment that I started thinking about, what's the job that art does in people's lives, was a game changer for me in terms of how I kind of play this out.
Yeah, you wrote a chapter in a book about this, about what the job that art does in someone's life, and it was interesting to me because it depended on what value that provided, because there were certain levels, right? And you equated this to the was it Maslow's hierarchy of needs?
Maslow's
right?
hierarchy of needs, and that was kind of my epiphany, right? I was sitting there with these artists, and I was talking to these artists, and they were struggling. Really, they were struggling with pricing, right? Because some of them were kind of doing cost plus pricing. It's like, oh, it cost me so much to make this painting or this sculpture. But I kept going back and thinking about this and thinking about what's the job that the art is doing? Why are people buying it? One of the famous quotes about jobs to be done, Arthur Levitt, who was a Harvard Business School professor, said that customers don't want quarter-inch drills; they want quarter-inch holes. And the drill is the way. So the thing that I kept thinking about, I was like, well, you don't hang a painting on your wall because you want to cover up a quarter-inch hole. Why are you hanging the painting on the wall? And that that kind of led me to thinking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that led me to thinking about what's been part of the jobs to be done framework from the beginning, which is the idea that there are functional jobs, right? Which are sort of our traditional use cases, right? I have a pen, right? What's the functional job of the pen? The functional job of the pen is to write things down, right? I need to capture information. But in a lot of products, we have emotional jobs and psychological jobs and social jobs that are going on, and that those are the jobs that art is doing for us. And that translates very well to then thinking about, kind of at its first cut, luxury products. And there was and I quote this study in the book chapter. There was a research study that was done looking at high net worth individuals and the reasons behind their purchase of art, antiques, Persian rugs. We're talking the top 1% of the top 1%. And the hypothesis kind of going in was, well, they're making investments, right? They're buying a Rothko painting because they know it will increase in value over the time. But when they actually talked to people, they said, no, that's not why we're buying it, right? Part of it is we're buying it because we want people to see that we appreciate that kind of stuff, right? It's status and social. We're buying it because we want to have something to leave to our children, right? And yes, there's a little bit of, there's a little bit of function. There's a really interesting set of research that was done on art, particularly in China, where it becomes a tangible way of transacting with officials without it being cash, right? I can give you a painting instead of giving you cash. But yeah, it's kind of funny. But when we actually look at them, and the study referenced them as treasures, right? They were considering them as treasures. And I love that, which is why I started to think about these things as treasured products, right? We don't buy them because we necessarily think we're going to sell them. We buy them because of what they mean to us, and what they might mean to our friends and our family. And it's applicable in art. It's applicable in luxury goods. It's definitely applicable in hospitality, right? And I was actually talking to somebody about this just the other night. MasterCard said it so well, right? In their priceless ads, you remember those?
Right? Oh yeah.
Tickets to the baseball game, $100.
Right.
Food at the baseball game, $75.
Right.
The hat or the glove or whatever souvenir you bought, right? $100. Spending time bonding with your son, priceless.
Right.
And that's really something that you see, is that as we begin to touch on these kind of higher order needs, what Maslow would consider higher order needs, the value becomes very different. And our ability to deliver value and our ability to price to value shifts from being a commodity, right, to being something that's meaningful for people. And it works with art, and it works with fashion, and it works with luxury goods. But it also can work with other consumer products, and I think business to business products too. That's where it gets really weird, right?
Yeah. So for what you're doing when you're coaching an artist, gosh, this is fascinating to me. Mm-hmm. And you talked about where they were kind of with how they were going to go price. They were thinking more about the work that they put into the piece of art rather than probably the way that they should approach this then is like the story behind it, right? And the story behind them, right? And sell on that value. Is that kind of how you coach them to have?
Yeah, my approach to pricing, and this is actually what I was talking to, I do some mentoring for SCORE as well, the Service Corps of Retired Executives. And I was meeting with a young woman just Monday night, and we were kind of, that's what she wanted to know, is like, how do I price my service? Right? It's actually a marketing automation service for dance studios. Cool. But if you, in business school, we were taught that there are three approaches to pricing, right? There's cost plus,
right?
There's competitive, and there's value, right? So I either figure out what my costs are and add a markup, or I price based on what my competitors are doing, or I price based on value, right? And I've turned that into a set of steps, right? The first thing we have to do is we have to understand our costs, because if I price below cost, I have a hobby. I don't have a business, right? I can't make any money. Now, and we'll have interesting conversations about loss leaders and all of that kind of stuff. But fundamentally, if I can't cover my costs, I don't have a business. So that's really working to understand, kind of the total, kind of what we might call today the total cost of ownership, but it's the total cost of delivering the product or service. So it's your time, it's your materials, right? It's really thinking about, it's a little bit about, allocation of expenses, so kind of cost of goods sold, and all of that, to kind of say what's the lowest price I can charge and still be profitable, right? The second step is you look at your competitors, right? And one of the things that Jobs to Be Done teaches us about competitors is competitors aren't people who do what you do. Competitors are people who solve the same problem that you solve. They get the same job done, right? That's why we look at, taxi cabs versus Uber versus the bus versus owning a car, right? It's all of the different alternatives. So again, just as we expand costs, we expand competition. So if you're, if the problem you're solving for your customers, who else is solving that problem for them, even if they're not providing the same services you are, and what are they charging, right? Because now I have a point of comparison, right? And I can say, okay, here's what I need to charge in order to make a profit, right? Here's what my competitors are charging, right? And I'm not necessarily saying price below your competitor, because I don't want to do low cost provider stuff, right? But I at least need to understand where I am, right? Do I think my product is better than theirs? Then I can charge more, right? If I think I can save money by shaving off some features that people don't use, then maybe I can price less. But it's not because I'm trying to undercut, it's because I'm offering a different solution. And this kind of, so there's another thing that we play with, which is this blue ocean strategy approach, which is about competing where the competition isn't. But it's also a very interesting framework for understanding how people value what's going on in the market. What are the competitors offering, and how valuable are they? How well are they performing the job? That if you apply that blue ocean strategy approach with the jobs to be done lens, you get a really interesting perspective in what's going on in the competitive landscape. Right? And then the last piece of it, so now that I understand where I am in relation to my competition, the last piece of it is like, okay, what's the value I'm providing? And how are my customers measuring the value that they're getting when I solve the jobs that I'm solving? Right? And some of that's very easy and it's quantitative, right? I will save you money, right? We love that one, right? Because saving money is a value that businesses have, right? It's like, all things being equal, I would rather spend less money than more. So following that sort of strategizer approach to looking at jobs to be done, we look at gains and pains, right? And how do we measure those gains and pains? So, in your world, with a payments function, right? Clearly, one of those is going to be cost, right? Mm-hmm. What's the per transaction cost? What's the monthly subscription? However we do that, right? What's the cost? And reducing their cost is a benefit to them, whether we view it as a gain because they're spending less money, or reducing a pain because they're spending less money. It doesn't matter, right? But what are the other values that they have, right? Convenience may be one, right? Security is one. Trust is one. Right? But it's also that sort of, it's been a while since I've been in this space. So this is where you're really going to help me out, right? If I'm talking to a CFO, if I'm talking to a controller about their treasury management function, right, at the end of the day, what is that controller looking for? Right. What makes, what keeps them, it's kind of like what keeps them up at night. It's probably not the per transaction cost of a credit card transaction.
No.
It's probably not the cost of positive pay.
No, you're right. And it's going to be different depending on the size of the financial institution. And, a lot of times it could be deposits, mm-hmm. It could be deposits. It could be their Fed funds rate. I mean, there's just going to be different things.
Right.
It's
it just popped into my head, and I was thinking about the virtual vault product that we had.
Yeah.
Right. Where funds that were deposited into a retail outlet's safe became immediately available to the owner, right? Because we knew that the money was coming to the bank. Right? It was in the safe, it was going to get there whenever it was going to get there. Right. So, what do I want? I want the freedom to use my money.
Yep.
Right. So maybe freedom becomes that higher value that we have. Right. And now we can really ask those hard questions. It's kind of, as I said, it's kind of that MasterCard approach, right? It's what's the value to you of knowing that you have the freedom to use those funds once you've received them, but before they've been deposited in the bank.
Right.
And those are kind of the fun questions that you get to. And that's that's where this conversation about jobs and understanding the value of the jobs and understanding the value of those higher order jobs, right? Those non-functional jobs, really becomes an eye opener, because we can price that way, but now we can sit back and we can say, okay, I'm going to design my virtual vault product, right?
Yeah.
What are the features that I can build into that create a measurable gain or reduction in pain for that controller, for that CFO, for that branch manager, right? For that regional, whoever it is, right? Because when we talk about jobs to be, and we use, I mean, in the examples of jobs to be done, right, they tend to be easy, right? We talk about simple things because we're talking about simple things. But if you're thinking about a business to business environment, there are multiple stakeholders, and those multiple stakeholders have different jobs that they're trying to balance at the same time. In the consumer space, automobiles are a great example. Like, why do we buy the car that we buy, right? We look at the factors, right? Does it get good gas mileage? Does it have the room for all the people that we need to transport on a regular basis? Does it have the storage, the cargo capacity that we need? Is it safe enough? Right? And ultimately it's kind of like, do I like it, right? Does it speak to who I am? But there are lots of different factors. There are lots of different use cases. There are lots of different functional, emotional, psychological, and social jobs. So we start looking at those and asking our customers, how do you know you've achieved success on that job? So now we can build features that do those things. Some of those features are going to be part of the product itself, right? And this is where I try to be really careful about phrase, right? Because the product isn't just the piece of software that I'm putting into them, right? That's Jeffrey Moore called it the core product, right? That kind of basic functionality. Right? But if you look at everything you need to do in order to satisfy the need of your customer, that's the whole product. That's going to include onboarding. It's going to include support. It's going to include, and again, we were playing in this space when we were working together, right? How do we train people how to use the product?
Right.
Because if they don't know how to use it, they're not going to get the value out of it.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
So how do we look at all of those things in order to satisfy those jobs?
And you started to talk a little bit about financial institutions, and financial institutions that I work with are on the smaller end, and they're a lot of times they are outsourcing their core and a lot outsourcing services to third parties. So as I start to coach those financial institutions on how they could use jobs to be done and that philosophy, into their marketing and into their, thinking about how they deliver products, how would you think, they should approach that? What would be your advice, to them and to me on how to do that?
From a delivery standpoint, and to me, it's sort of a question of outsourcing as well as, kind of the buy build conversation.
Yeah.
The choice to buy a commercially available software product, right? Software as service or something that's on-prem, right? That's a solution question, right? That's a question of which quarter of how do I make my quarter inch hole? And the better I understand the job that I'm trying to do, the easier I can evaluate my options. So, as I look across that space and say, okay, I need a solution to solve this problem, either for my own business or for my customers.
Yeah.
I need to understand who are the stakeholders, right? It's a jobs to be done approach to doing stakeholder analysis. Who are the stakeholders? What are the jobs they need to get done? Functional jobs, psychological, emotional, and social jobs. That plays a little bit differently when you're in a business environment, but it's still there, right?
Yeah.
That CFO, that economic buyer, the person that's going to write a check, right? They want, confidence that it's going to get done. They want trust that the vendor is going to provide needs. So I need to understand all of those things, right? That becomes the driver of my RFP, right? Here's the job that my accounting team needs to do, right? Here's the job that my controller needs to do at my client company. What are the options available, and how do those options score on getting those various jobs done? That's going to help me determine which of the available products that are out there do I want. And if there isn't anything that gets me my critical needs, maybe I have to go build it. And you can do the same thing with a service provider. You can ask yourself the question about somebody that you're outsourcing work to. Because why are you outsourcing work? You're outsourcing work because it's almost the easiest one, right? It's like, small businesses hiring a social media marketing person, right? I know what I need to have done. I can't do it. I don't have the knowledge, the skills, or the time to do it. So I need to find somebody who can do it. What are the jobs I need them to do? Right? Generate leads, convert leads, whatever that may be. And now I can go find the person that can do that.
We used to think about personas and use cases. We still have to think about those end users when we're doing jobs.
Oh yes, absolutely.
All
the work that we do in design thinking in terms of understanding those personas, it's still there. Right?
It's still there.
We still do user journey maps. Right?
Yeah.
As I look at the primary jobs, right? What's their journey to getting that job done? Because that's going to help me find both the non-functional jobs as well as the ways to measure them.
Yeah.
Right? So that's a tool to help gather this insight.
And 20 years ago, we might not have known what jobs to be done was, but we were asking some of the questions.
We were. I often tell people that I was doing product management before we knew to call it product management, because 30 years ago, business analysts were doing that, right? I'll take a business analyst and train them to be a product manager. That's a thing we can do, because the basic skills are there in terms of asking questions and understanding user needs. Now we just have a different lens to run it through.
And that's how I grew up. I was a business analyst before I was a product manager. The skill set's natural. It just kind of flows right into it. So as a jobs to be done practitioner / kind of, I guess, borderline expert, because you're really applying this well, where do you kind of see this going in the near future? How do you see jobs to be done getting applied other places?
So just for me, right? Because me, I'm going to push envelopes. One of the things that I started thinking about it in terms of, the first of them is marketing, right? So I don't know about you, but I go to buy something online and they want my email because they want to send me email marketing, and they want my phone number so they can send me text marketing, SMS marketing. And then I immediately unsubscribe, because what's going to happen is I'm going to get a text message to tell me about something that I don't need to know about, right? And email's one thing because it's not intrusive, but text messages, it's sort of, right, it's like, right now, my phone flashed a text message, I'd look at it, right? If it's going to flash an email, I'm not going to do it. So I started kind of railing about how ineffective that was, and they need to do it right. And I started asking my question, what's the job that the marketing communication is doing, right? Oftentimes, as marketers, we send communications to satisfy our needs, right? I need to tell you about the new product. I need to tell you about the new sale, right? I need to tell you that you left something in your shopping cart and you need to check out.
Right.
What's the job that the marketing communication does for the customer, right? What's the problem you're solving for them? And I think that if we do a better job of that, we'll have higher open rates on our emails. We'll have higher response rates. So that's kind of an interesting place that I've started to play.
Okay.
And the one that's really out there for me. I was teaching a business planning class to a group of makers, artisans and artists, and we were kind of talking about goals, right? So what are your financial goals for your business, and your personal goals, and your artistic goals, and your impact goals about what's how do you have an impact that you want to have on your customers around the world. And that got me thinking about, particularly for small business owners and solopreneurs, what's the job that your business is doing for you, right? So what's the job that now we get really personal, and you don't have to answer the questions now because lots of people are going to see this, but it's something to think about.
Sure.
What are the jobs that your business is doing for you right now? Right. There's a financial piece to it.
Right.
Right. You need and want to make some money. Right. There's probably a personal dimension to it. Right.
Sure.
What you get out of being your own. Right. There might be an impact. Right. The impact that you want to have on your customers. Right. And on the banking industry and on treasury management. Right? So if I start treating your business as a product that you've hired to fulfill all of these needs, what does it look like if we say every quarter assess how well is the product doing at meeting your needs?
Yeah.
And just like we go through these sort of agile iterations with products that we sell to people, right? What does that evaluation look like? And then how do we tweak it? Right?
Yeah.
If you say, you know what, I got into this because I wanted to have more time to go do things that are fun and things that I like to do, but I don't. Right? How do I alter the product, right, to do that better for me?
Right. That's very interesting.
Yeah. So that's and then I realized you could also do it for jobs, just people's jobs.
Right.
I could sit down with somebody who's working for another business, and ask, how good is your job at doing the jobs that you hired your jobs for?
Right. You hired your job to do. Yep.
Yeah. So again, that notion of we have things to satisfy needs, to do jobs.
Yeah.
We have lots of ways to do that. So one space that I'm kind of playing, as I said, is marketing communication, and then looking at the sort of general, how is the business that you're running doing in satisfying your needs as a business owner?
It's interesting. It kind of starts to cross over into like utility and economics, the utility value, when you talk about utility. Very interesting.
It's really what it is. And and I think that's part of where it came from. I mean, Arthur Levitt was an economics guy to begin with, as this kind of came up. But so it's, as I said, it's an interesting tool to apply. And sometimes, as I said, I started with this marketing communication thing. It's like, what does that look like? The answer is it may not, right?
Right.
I play around with it for a while.
It's
also something that we learn from sort of the intellectual ecosystem around this is this sort of iterative and experimental approach, right? Try it, see if it works. If it doesn't work, well, try it, evaluate the results. Right, and then make changes and try it again. It may be that this is just not going to work in terms of marketing communication. Bad idea, James. Put that in the same category as disposable socks. But otherwise, it could teach us something about what we're doing.
Yeah.
And ultimately help us better serve our stakeholders, which is going to make for thriving businesses. Right.
That's
kind
right.
of that whole thing that I wrap my head around about. Products that matter in ways that matter, and using that as the base upon which to build a thriving business.
This has been a fascinating and an extremely informative conversation. I can't believe we've come to the end, but Our clients, prospects, and subscribers really appreciate this, and I appreciate you coming on. Where can we find you? Where can our subscribers
So
find you?
you can find me at jamesszuch.com.
JamesSzuch.com.
JamesSzuch.com. And
Yep.
you can find Sparq at teamsparq.com.
Okay. All right. And we'll get that on the screen for you. And thanks to all of our clients, prospects, and subscribers that have tuned in for In the DeNovo. And James, again, thank you for joining us today. Everyone have a great day, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, everyone. I love it when a good conversation comes together. We are so lucky to have friends willing to sit down and talk with us about the industry. For more content like the video we shared today, check out our website at DeNovoTreasury.com and our YouTube channel at DeNovo Treasury. Thanks for joining us today for In the DeNovo. See you next time.